Now that we've covered the 7 factors of engagement, let's talk about his 5 rules. Rule number 1, you need to upgrade your attitude. So here's the thing, kids can sense a bad attitude like dogs can sense fear. They just know when you're in a bad mood, and your mood can really truly set the tone in your classroom. If you want students to be engaged in your classroom, I hate to say this, but you're going to have to fake it till you make it. Meaning, even when you've had the worst morning in the world, you need to walk in with a positive attitude. You need to make it a goal to engage every student every day. Think about what techniques you use for this, and you'll be adding them to the comment room. Think about affirmations, constantly telling them, nice job, or great job. But here's the kicker to affirmations. Make sure you tell them why, otherwise it defeats the purpose. Use small engagers like brain breaks. This can be tied to the curriculum as well, but kids need physical activity to learn and be engaged in your classroom. And let them know it's okay to fail. You need to understand this as much as your students do when the learning process is underway. Think about these 4 facts. 51% of students attending public education qualify for free and reduced lunch for the first time ever. 40% to 60% of high school students are emotionally disengaged from high school. 50% of new teachers leave the profession within 5 years. Large numbers of students who eventually became dropouts perceive teacher interest in students to be low. What are these 4 facts telling us? What is the challenge here? What are we seeing? Relationships? Poverty? Number 3 is fascinating to me, and I bet you it's even higher. So when we talk about the 5 rules, think about how we build relationships and respect with students. Back in the day, it didn't matter if you cared about your students or that you showed it. It seemed like the concept was very institutionalized. So students didn't really need to feel connected to teachers. But the reality of it is time has shifted and adults have injured relationships with students. We are now in a situation where you have to earn child respect or student respect. It doesn't come naturally anymore. Students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You have to smile before April. You have to smile before November. You have to smile on the very first day. So once again, think about building relationships and requests, that technique harvest. What are you currently doing in your classroom to do this? Think about sharing who you are every day, sharing personal stories with them, showing full signs of respect for your students, their culture, their background, their families, where they're coming from. And use interactive language with them, not top-down language. Now, this will be interesting. Let's think about priorities of school. If I were to think of the top priorities of school, I would say social, emotional, safety, relationships, and last but not least, learning. Notice I didn't say content. What are your 4 priorities of school? Take a minute. Think about it. My assumption is your priorities don't necessarily match up with your students. So for rule number 3, it's really important to get buy-in from your students. Here's the thing. School is an obligation, not a joy or a privilege, especially to students in poverty. They're raised in a culture or a family where education is not the priority. So you need to sell yourself, the content, the learning process. You are the used car salesman for your classroom. If students don't care about the content, find relevant, or they don't feel they need to know it, then they're not going to learn flat out. They need to have all 3 of those pieces. So technique harvest, what do you do in your classroom about buy-in? Think about the bigger kid challenge. How can you challenge your students to be that bigger kid? What incentives do you use for learning? Are students naturally curious? Of course they are. So how are you using it in your classroom? There's nothing wrong with healthy competition. Now, chunk down the buy-in, meaning you don't have to have incentives for every single activity or every single learning event in your classroom. Chunk it out. Lower the stakes. Remember, you don't have to grade everything. And take advantage of their imagination. It's amazing what kids will come up with. Rule number 4, Embrace clarity. Kids need a GPS for your class. They can't read your mind and they need to know where you're going. And if you are in a situation where they switch classes, all teachers teach very differently. So they, in essence, have 5, 6, 7 different bosses. Can you imagine? Think about it. So your plan has to be very, very intentional. While learning can be fun, it needs to be geared towards specific targets. So think about what you're doing in your classroom for clarity. Learning targets, simplicity. Say what you want, not what you don't want from your students. That can be deemed as confusing. Look familiar? Do we know this gentleman from Ferris Bueller's Day Off? I'm pretty sure we do. Let's watch a quick clip.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the Great Depression, passed the a tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Okay, so passion, final rule. Show your passion. Passion can be very powerful. When you look at great speakers throughout history, it was their passion that moved people and engaged them in the process. It can drive excitement, curiosity, and inspiration. And they can tell when you're going through the motions, when you don't care about the content area, when you're just doing your job. Nonverbal messages are really important. Students are actually paying attention to 85% of your body language and 15% of your verbal words. That's how important nonverbal messages are. You need to poise yourself in a very open manner when speaking with students, whether it's assigning, giving direct instruction, whatever the situation is. Think about your technique harvest. Show your passion. How are you showing your passion in your classroom? Are you staying active? Are you having students stay active? Are you varying your voice purposefully? Keep focused on your students and remember, always be positive.